I'm 86 years old, and I lost my marriage after 31 years because I believed there would always be more time. That's the truth of it. No scandal, no betrayal, just time, quietly running out while I was busy believing it wasn't. I'm telling you this because my days are shorter now. The house is quiet in a way that feels permanent. And when the evenings come, there's no one left who remembers the small details of my life the way she did. That's what disappears first, you see, not the big things, the small, ordinary remembering. I had a good life, at least by the standards we used back then, a steady job, a home, children who grew into decent people, responsibilities met, bills paid. I did what I thought a man was supposed to do, and I thought that was enough. When I met my wife, I was 24. She was 22. Her name was Margaret. She had a quiet laugh, not loud, not attention-seeking, just a soft sound that made you feel you'd said something worthwhile. She noticed things, the way clouds gathered before rain, the smell of clothes dried in the sun, the exact way you took your tea. I noticed her noticing. We married young, like many did then. There wasn't much discussion about happiness or fulfillment. Marriage was something you entered with seriousness. You worked at it, you endured, you provided. Love was there, of course, but it wasn't something we talked about much. It lived in routines, in meals prepared, in shirts ironed, in the light left on when one of us came home late. I started working long hours almost immediately. There was always a reason, a promotion to chase, a supervisor to impress, extra shifts to secure our future. I told myself I was doing it for us, for the house we would buy, for the children we would raise, for the comfort we would one day enjoy together. And she understood, or at least she said she did. Our early years were busy in a way that feels warm when I remember them. Small rented apartment, thin walls, the sound of neighbors arguing through the night. We would sit at the tiny kitchen table and plan a future we believed was waiting patiently for us. She would talk about places she wanted to see, a seaside town, a quiet village with flowers along the roads. I would nod and say one day became a phrase I used often. When our first child was born, everything changed. Responsibility became heavier, more urgent. I worked even more. Nights, weekends, whatever was needed. I missed the first time our son walked. I was at the factory. She told me later, smiling, but there was something in her eyes I didn't quite understand then. I told her there would be other moments. There were, but I missed many of them too. Our daughter's school play, a birthday dinner, a Sunday afternoon she had set aside for us to visit her parents. Something always came up. Something always seemed more pressing. I would apologize. I meant those apologies truly. But apologies I learned too late do not return lost hours. Margaret rarely complained. That was part of the problem. She was patient, steady. She carried disappointment quietly. She would say things like, "You look tired," or "We'll do it another time." And I believed there would always be another time. Years passed that way. Work expanded to fill every available space. Promotions came. We moved into a larger house. The children grew. Life appeared successful from the outside. We had security, stability, the things I had worked so hard to build. But something inside the house was slowly thinning. I remember evenings when I would come home late and find her already asleep, a book resting on her chest, a lamp still on beside the bed. I would switch off the light and think nothing of it. Now I understand she had waited for me. There were small conversations that never happened. She would begin to speak while I scanned the newspaper. I would nod without hearing. She would stop mid-sentence and say it wasn't important. I believed her. She once asked if we could take a short trip together, just the two of us. The children were older by then. We could manage it. I said work was too demanding at the moment. Perhaps next year. Next year never came. The changes were gradual, almost invisible, while they were happening. She became quieter, less eager to share her thoughts. She developed her own routines that did not involve me. She joined a reading group, started taking long walks alone in the evenings, spent more time visiting friends. I told myself this was healthy. Independence was good. We were both simply busy. But busyness can build walls without making a sound. There was no dramatic fight, no shouting, no breaking point that announces itself clearly. Just distance. I remember one particular evening. I came home earlier than usual. She was sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded, as if she had been waiting. She said very calmly that she felt alone in our marriage. I was surprised, even offended, if I'm honest. Hadn't I worked all these years for our family? Hadn't I sacrificed my own comforts? I told her she was being unfair, that everything I did was for us. She listened, she nodded, and she said something I still hear in my mind. I didn't need everything. I needed you. At the time, I thought she was speaking from temporary emotion. People say things when they're tired, when they're overwhelmed. I believed the feeling would pass. There would be time to fix it later. Later is a dangerous word. The years that followed were quieter still. The children left home. The house became spacious in a way that felt unfamiliar. We moved around each other politely, shared meals, discussed practical matters. But the closeness that once existed had faded into something formal. Like two careful strangers who respected each other. Then came the turning point. She became ill in her early 50s. Nothing dramatic at first, just fatigue. Small complaints she dismissed. I was still working heavily then. Meetings, travel, responsibilities I believed could not wait. She attended doctor appointments alone. When the diagnosis finally came, it was already advanced. A slow illness, the kind that gives you time to understand what is happening while taking everything away piece by piece. I remember sitting beside her hospital bed, holding a hand I realized I had not held properly in years. Suddenly, time mattered more than anything. I canceled work. I stayed close. I spoke words that had been waiting decades to be spoken. But urgency cannot replace absence. She was kind to me during those months, gentle even. But there was a distance in her kindness, a quiet acceptance that something essential between us had already ended long before the illness. One afternoon, she said she had made peace with her life. She said it softly, without accusation. I wanted to ask if she had made peace with me, but I was afraid of the answer. She died 6 months later. The house after her death felt unfamiliar, as if I had been placed in someone else's life. Her presence had filled spaces I never noticed until they were empty. Her chair remained by the window. Her books lined the shelves, small traces everywhere. And I began to see clearly what had happened. I had not lost my marriage in a single moment. I had surrendered it slowly, day by day, believing I was preserving our future. I thought love could wait, that attention could be postponed, that presence could be scheduled later. I was wrong. Some things require their time when they ask for it, not afterward. I am often asked now in my old age whether I regret working hard. No, work has dignity. Providing for one's family is honorable. But I regret believing that provision was the same as presence. I regret the conversations I postponed, the walks I declined, the small invitations I treated as interruptions. I regret thinking that the person who loved me would always understand, always wait, always remain. People do not remain unchanged while we delay them. After she died, I tried to remember the last ordinary day we shared when nothing urgent demanded my attention. I could not. The years had blurred into a long corridor of obligations, and somewhere along that corridor, I lost the woman who had once laughed softly at my table. What cannot be fixed is not only her absence. What cannot be fixed is the life we did not live together, the trips not taken, the evenings not shared, the words left unsaid when there was still time to say them without urgency. You cannot return to a moment and inhabit it properly once it has passed. Time does not store opportunities. It only moves forward. Now I wake each morning in a quiet house. I make tea for one. I speak aloud sometimes, forgetting she is not in the next room. Memory becomes both comfort and punishment. I remember how she noticed small things. I remember how she waited. I remember how patient she was with a man who always believed tomorrow would be more convenient. If you are listening to me now, I am not here to tell you what you must do. I have no authority over your life. I can only tell you what I learned when learning no longer changed anything. Attention is a form of love. Time is a form of love. Presence is a form of love. And when withheld long enough, love quietly changes shape. If this story means something to you, perhaps you will think about the people who sit across from you at dinner, who wait for your voice, who ask for your time in small ways. Not because I say you should, but because one day the chance to give it may no longer exist. At my age, the future is not a long road. It is a short path with a visible end. I live with acceptance now. The regret remains, but it is settled into something quieter. I loved my wife. I truly did. I simply believed I had more time to show it. That was my mistake. The night grows longer these days. I sit by the window where her chair once stood and watch the light fade from the sky. There is peace in accepting what cannot be changed. But there is also a silence that no success, no achievement, no careful planning can fill. I tell you this because my voice will not be here much longer. And if anything of my life is to remain, I hope it is this simple truth. The time you think you have is not yours to keep. I learned that after 31 years, and by then she was already gone.
Time has spoken. What will you do with yours? Subscribe for wisdom that lasts.